This is week 3 of our demos, and we will be talking about a high-level overview of encounters and what encounters are. It's presented by Caitlin, myself, Rabab, and Haley, and I am Rosie. I'm a clinical informatics specialist with CST Cerner for BC Cancer, and my portfolio is mainly clerical. I am originally from Surrey Cancer Agency, working as an RN in chemo mostly, but also worked many different areas, including RT and pain and symptom and clinic. And before that, I worked at the Vancouver Centre in radiation. So that's a bit about me. You got the slides on there, Haley?
We're good to go.
All right, perfect. So just like to start with the land acknowledgement. I would like to recognize that we are conducting our business today on the unceded and traditional lands of the Stolo people, particularly the Sumas and Matsqui First Nations. Please take a moment to reflect, acknowledge, and honor the original occupants of the land you live, work, and play. So from today's demonstration, you will get a understanding of what an encounter is, learn about the different types of encounters used at BC Cancer, importance of choosing the correct encounter, and the patient journey through encounters. If you can be sure to sign in. If you're in the room, there's a sheet going around, and if you're online, you can just sign in the chat. Also, if you could please mute your mic, turn off cameras when not speaking, and if you could also reserve your questions till the end, just because this is demos are recorded and available post-session. And Haley, I don't know if you want to mute the mic there because there's little bits of noise coming through.
I don't know if oh yeah.
So what is an encounter? An encounter is defined as a single patient interaction and or a series of visits to, oh, did we lose them? No. Okay. Interaction and or a series of visits to the health organization. So encounters are really important to understand as they are the foundation to the patient's visits or sequence of visits and all the pertaining documentation. Patient's care is tracked using encounter. Each encounter is similar to a patient chart or a chartlet, and every scheduled appointment is linked to encounter. So essentially, an encounter is a patient's visit or sequence of visits. Encounters must be created to attach reports, documentations, and orders, like having a patient chart to put all the information into, similar to having different tabs in the chart for different clinicians to fill in information under one encounter. And then the beauty just having this all electronically is we don't have to wait for a physical chart to be completed by other clinicians. Everything is in real time and instant. Types of encounters. So the encounter type reflects the current level of service the patient is receiving. Encounter type also changes during a single episode of care, and this is called care transitions. For instance, the pre-registered status to a fully registered encounter. A pre-registered encounter is important as it allows the clerk to schedule appointments, clinicians to add notes, provider to see referral package or view the chart prior to the patient arriving for the appointment. Essentially, it allows us to set the patient up for success with previewing documentation and scheduling appointments before the patient arrives for that appointment. And then once the patient has arrived for the appointment, the encounter becomes fully registered. So the first example here is the referral encounter, and this is used while a new patient is being triaged until a patient is ready to be scheduled. Pre-outpatient used to schedule future outpatient appointments, which is then changed or the word flipped is used into an outpatient encounter, which is used for the appointment itself when the patient arrives. Pre-recurring, again, this is used prior to the patient arriving to schedule the future appointments. And then recurring encounter is used for multiple schedule appointments linked to one encounter, such as radiation treatment or systemic therapy. And then this is the same for the pre-day surgery, so used to schedule future appointments such as brachytherapy, and then that's flipped to the day surgery encounter once the patient arrives. And then inpatient is just for the Vancouver Center for overnight inpatient stays. So each encounter is linked to a medical service and a location. Okay, so this is pretty important to understand why there are different encounters, as there are different medical services and different locations as well. So each encounter has a medical service such as medical oncology, radiation oncology, surgical oncology, referral oncology. And then each encounter has a different location, and this is such as ACU, RTST, RONC, surgical, ACU triage, chemo, things like that, different locations. And then the first image we see here is the clerk's view of the encounter. So we see here that it was in the pre-recurring state and is now flipped to the recurring state. So maybe they've arrived for their first appointment for chemo, as this is a medical service of medical oncology and the location is chemo. We see below, the image below, that has a list of multiple encounters. So a patient can have multiple encounters, and we see their columns listed as encounter type, and then different medical services and the different clinic locations. Selecting the correct encounter is very important. I'm going to show you two ways to do this. So first of all, ambulatory organizer, or AO, is the way to go. So that's the best way to ensure that you are landing on the correct encounter, is choosing your patient through ambulatory organizer. And this would be in Power Chart, ambulatory organizer. You have a list of patients listed according to their resource, their oncologist, whatever group you've selected. And then you click on the patient's name and it will bring up the patient's chart automatically under the correct encounter. So you don't have to go searching for the right encounter. Now, say for instance, you had to look up the patient. There is a way to do this under in the top bar here. Okay, so the search bar here, you can put the patient's name in, and then it will bring up a list of encounters for you. Now, if you do find yourself faced with this list, it can look a little intimidating. So here's a few pointers. First of all, if you organize by discharge date, you can rule out the discharged encounters, as these are not applicable. Next, if we know that the patient, say, is just arriving and hasn't actually had an appointment under this encounter, we can rule out the registered encounter, the recurring one, and then we just focus on the pre-recurring, pre-registered encounters. And then if we know, for instance, that it is a pre-recurring encounter type under the medical oncology medical service, and say they are coming for chemo, we know that we would select this one right here. Okay, so as I said, AO is the way to go. This can get a little bit tricky when searching for the patient in this way, but those are a few tips if you do find yourself in this with this selection to make. And then also in Power Chart, on the patient's banner bar at the top here, there is a way to select the encounter. So it tells you the encounter type right here, which is a recurring and active, and then above it says the location, BCC, VA, RONC. If you hover over the encounter type, it will underline and you can actually click on it, and it will bring up that list of encounters that I showed you on the previous slide, and then you can select the correct encounter if, say, for instance, you've landed on the wrong encounter, which can be have effects going down that can negatively impact patient safety. So that's why it's so important to select the correct encounter. Um, because it can impact, if you select the incorrect encounter, it can impact barcode scanning for medications, orders and results, reports, billing information, and many other clinical and organizational activities. So just being sure, this is why we're letting you know how important it is to understand encounters and how to select the correct encounter and make sure you're on the correct encounter. And then this is just about flipping an encounter, which I've mentioned. So when we flip an encounter, what we are doing is changing it from one type to another. So for instance, the pre-recurring flip to a recurring encounter. So this is a little bit of a busy slide, but I'll just go through it briefly with you. So the referral encounter to the pre-outpatient encounter. So basically what happens is the clerk will receive a referral package through WorkQ Monitor, an application called WorkQ Monitor, and we'll index all those documents to the patient's chart, creating a referral encounter, okay? And this referral encounter will be used to review all the documentations and then change the status to ready to triage. So the oncologist then knows to assess and either accept, redirect, refuse, or hold the referral. Again, all this information is stored in this referral encounter. And then the clerk will see, once the referral is accepted, can book the new patient appointment. And this will be when the clerk will change the referral encounter to the pre-outpatient encounter. Okay, so again, letting us know that the patient has an appointment booked for an outpatient consult and has not yet arrived. So all of the documents can be viewed. And then once the patient arrives, the encounter again will be flipped to an outpatient encounter once it is fully registered and the patient is here. So let's take a journey through the patient or the patient's journey through encounters, okay? So this is Al Park Learn. She is a 38-year-old female referred to radiation oncology with stage 1B2 squamous cell carcinoma of the cervix. Al's journey includes a consult with the radiation oncologist, which will be one outpatient encounter, and then a consult with the medical oncologist, which will be a second outpatient encounter, then concurrent radiation and chemotherapy treatments. So this will be two different recurring encounters. And then 4 surgical brachytherapy treatments, which will be 4 separate day surgery encounters. For the radiation oncology appointment, Elle arrives to meet her radiation oncologist, and prior to this appointment, she's had the referral encounter switched to the pre-outpatient encounter, and now she's arrived for the radiation oncologist appointment. So the pre-outpatient encounter will be flipped to the outpatient as we will register it. This will be done with the registration clerk, and during this time, demographics will be checked, any insurance information, all the necessary information will be checked, and Elle will be checked in for her appointment. And then all of the documentation for this visit, for the consult with the radiation oncologist, will be stored in this encounter. And as it is an outpatient encounter, all outpatient encounters are automatically discharged after 24 hours. This is the clerk's view again, just going over again what it looks like in the pre-outpatient, flip to the outpatient encounter type, and then the medical services radiation oncology in this situation with the clinic ACU RTST. It's really important that the patient is checked in and this process is completed by the clerk at registration, as if this step is missed, important information can be missed and statistical information can be missed. And then it won't be discharged after the 24 hours as well, which can cause some confusion later on as well. So here we have Elle. She, as I said, she goes to the reception desk and she is checked in through ambulatory organizer. All the staff are using ambulatory organizer to access our patients, so they land on the correct encounter. And so the reception clerk will check Elle in, which will let the nurse know in Cerner that, or specifically ambulatory organizer, that Elle is ready to be seen by the nurse, and all the information and assessment information will be stored in this encounter from the nurse, and then the oncologist as well, who will order some radiation treatment. So again, Elle is back for another day to discuss with the medical oncologist regarding dual modality with chemo. So again, another encounter would have been created for this. This would be the pre-outpatient encounter. Same thing, flipped, but this time, sorry, it's under the medical service of medical oncology, and the location is ACU RTST. So when she arrives for that appointment, it's flipped to the outpatient. And all the orders and all the information from that visit are stored again in this encounter. And then again, this encounter, as it is an outpatient encounter, will be discharged automatically after the 24 hours. So you don't chart on it again after this visit. And then again, the same thing, the reception clerk will check Elle in, and the nurse will see the patient, and all that information will be stored again in this encounter. And then the oncologist will order some chemo for Elle. So then Elle will have her radiation treatment appointments. So this will be the pre-recurring appointment that's created initially, so we can book the appointments, and then when she arrives for the appointment, it'll be flipped again to the recurring encounter. And this recurring encounter allows multiple appointments to be booked to this encounter. So all the radiation related appointments, such as CT sim, the fractions of radiation treatment, the PR visits, all that is charted under this encounter. Okay. And then this one will actually remain open until Elle has completed her treatment and will be manually discharged. So during her treatment, there are multiple recurring encounters open at the same time. So this is why, again, it can look confusing if you're just looking at the encounter type. We need to also look at, okay, we've got a recurring encounter, but it's for, say, the radiation treatment. So we have the radiation oncology medical service in the wrong location, and that would be the correct encounter. And then the other one would be the recurring encounter with the medical oncology medical service and the chemo location for all the chemo infusion visits. Okay, and then the recurring encounter of medical oncology, ACU, RT, and this would be the visits between cycles for chemo treatment, or while the patient is receiving their chemo when they're seen in the clinic by the oncologist. So now Elle has completed her radiation and chemo treatments, and the clerk will get notified in Cerner that the the chemo treatment is complete. So the recurring encounter under the medical service of medical oncology and location chemo can be manually discharged by the clerk once that order is received. And then an order in area will be received for the recurring encounter of radiation oncology in the location of RONC to be manually discharged. And then those 4 separate day surgery visits, the brachytherapy, each one will be in the pre-day surgery status until Elle arrives for her brachytherapy appointment, and then it will be flipped to the day surgery, and all the documentation, everything related to the brachytherapy appointment for that visit will be documented under that encounter. And then this will be manually discharged at the end of the day once the visit is complete for that brachytherapy treatment. And that will be the same for all 4 of those brachytherapy visits. Troubleshooting, so a little bit of involvement from you guys. Which encounter do we need to select for the patient's chemotherapy infusion visit? Anybody know?
Anyone? I know it's small. We went over this earlier.
Is it the pre-recurring medical oncology chemo visit?
Yes, that is correct. So there we go. So the chemo one is correct. So we've got the pre-recurring. So say she's arriving for her first chemo appointment and she's just being registered for that recurring encounter under the medical service of medical oncology, and the location is chemo. So if we selected the wrong encounter, there are a couple of places or a couple of things to do. So for the clerk, CST help pages, we can fix an appointment associated with an incorrect encounter. And then for clinicians, providers, nurses, and allied health under the CST health pages, we can look up switch to another encounter. And that was actually what I displayed to you earlier about how we can switch an encounter. Finally, there is a Learning Hub module called BCC, the role of the encounter. And it may be already in the list of modules that you need to complete, but be sure to do this one as it's really helpful in understanding encounter, and parts of this presentations were taken from this module. So just to solidify your knowledge. All right, I got a little demo video for you here.
This is the application scheduling appointment book in Cerner. I will show you the way to check in a patient in scheduling appointment book briefly.
Oops. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Let's try that again.
This is the application scheduling appointment book in Cerner. I will show you the way to check in a patient in scheduling appointment book briefly. Here is our patient's appointment, and they have now arrived for their new patient consult with radiation oncology. We can right-click on the patient's appointment and go to Actions. In Actions, we see Check-in. This will bring up a window for the patient's appointment that we can then verify and bring up the encounter. Before we do the encounter, I will show you how to do this in ambulatory organizing. Here we have power chart. This is ambulatory organizer in power chart. I've already brought up the resource, Peter Lim, who is the radiation oncologist who will be seeing our patient L. Park Learn. This is the appointment and all the appointments listed for Dr. Peter Lim. Currently, the patient's appointment is in the confirmed status. If we click on confirm, we can see other statuses. We will click check in for this in-person patient appointment. If the patient is over the phone or a telehealth visit, we can click arrived, letting the clerk know that the patient was seen over telehealth. Or if the patient does not show for the appointment, we can click no show, letting the clerk know that they need to rebook the appointment. Right now, we will check in the patient. This window pops up. We can click OK. At this point, it asks us to select the conversation we would like to use. We will register to outpatient. This brings up the encounter. If this is the patient's first visit, we need to make sure that we are entering all the pertinent data for the demographics. Since I have already used this patient for demonstration purposes, all the information is entered. We can verify this information at registration. Patient address, phone number, other statuses here. This field is a mandatory field as well, Indigenous identity. We will go to the encounter information. This was created as a pre-registered outpatient encounter. We will now flip to a full registered outpatient encounter. It is under the medical service of radiation oncology, and the clinic is ACU RTSD in Vancouver. The source ID, we will say this patient presented with BC Services card with photo, and that we did verify that the primary care provider is Test Alex. We will also enter in a referring provider. We will use Test Alex for this situation. We will also verify insurance information, which, if this is the first time a patient has arrived to their appointment, all this information will need to be completed. Any additional contacts can be entered as well, including emergency contact, next of kin, and any other pertinent data. The oncology ready to treat date is an important entry for patients who are going to receive treatment. As this is a consult and we don't know if the patient will receive treatment, we will leave these fields empty. We can complete, and at this point, a window will open asking us if we want to print any documents such as arm bands and face sheets. As we do not want to print documents, we will keep the default to do not print documents. Now we can see the status has turned to blue and the patient is checked in. When the nurse goes to see the patient, the nurse can also change the status to seen by nurse. The status will then turn to green. Same with the provider. When the provider sees the patient, they can also change the status to seen by provider, which will turn orange. If the patient is in a room and we want to communicate this, we can stay in the room. There are many statuses we can use in this situation to communicate the patient's status. I will now show you where to find encounter types in the patient's chart. This is our patient's chart right here from the clerk point of view. Everyone will have this blue bar at the top with the patient's information. If we hover over encounter type, it underlines it and we can click on it. When we click on it, it opens all of the encounters that the patient has. We can see here that there are multiple encounters for this patient. If we organize by discharge date, and we're trying to find an encounter, perhaps we have landed on the incorrect encounter, we can rule out the discharged encounters as these are not relevant. If we know that we want a recurring encounter, we can rule out all of the other outpatient encounters of the surgery encounter here. We see that there are 2 recurring encounters that are currently registered. Say, for instance, the patient is coming for chemo. We can see that there is 1 recurring encounter under the medical service of medical oncology, and the location is chemo. This is just one way to find an encounter.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. How long do the doctors have to put in their dictation into the system?
Sorry, I had a hard time hearing that. What was that?
How long do the doctors have to put in their dictation into the visit? It's 24 hours before it discharges. That would be if it's the outpatient. What if it's under a recurring visit? Then until we discharge it. So if it's a recurring visit for a series, so say there's like 8 cycles in a chemo, then they see a med-onc before each cycle. That would be under recurring. Yeah. So, but they don't get discharged until the very end after the 8 cycles. I believe they should still have the opportunity to fill
Okay.
it in, but we can ask the provider leader for that as well. Yeah.
So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're asking is for the follow-up clinic visits with the oncologist?
That's correct.
Okay, so for the medical oncologist, the recurring encounter is separate for the clinic visits and will remain open after the chemo. So there's a recurring encounter for the chemo infusion visits under medical oncology, and then there's a recurring encounter for the ACU RT-ST, which will be the clinic visits for medical oncology.
So how long does the provider, the physician have to put in their dictation for the recurring clinic visits? Is
So
there a time limit?
they will manually put in when that recurring encounter is completed, so needs to be discharged. So they have as long as they need to until they decide that that's complete. Does that make sense?
So there's no time limit.
No, it's whenever, however long they need to keep that recurring encounter open for their clinic visits with medical oncology.
But if it's an outpatient, if it's a outpatient encounter, then they need to do it within 24 hours because then that encounter is discharged.
They can still chart on a discharged encounter, which is why it's so important that we're recognizing that these encounters get discharged, because it is still possible to chart on a discharged encounter. Good questions.
I have a question from a pharmacy perspective for like when we're booking pharmacy teaches or, a patient coming in or being phoned from the pharmacy regarding their new start of medication. Is that booked under the same way as all of these other encounters?
So there are different things to keep in mind for that question. My understanding is if it's linked to a chemo appointment of some sort, then it would be under that recurring encounter. If it's an encounter that needs to be created, then there's a way to notify the clerk to create an encounter for, say, for instance, a teach or something that's not linked to another appointment.
Will we learn how to do that? Because some of us in pharmacy, some of us technicians and the pharmacists included, will book teaches for, say, like outpatient, for outside prescribers. We'll go ahead and we'll book those teaches through. And so is that something that we're going to learn how to do so we're able to do that and continue that work in our department?
So good question as well. Pharmacists will not be able to do any booking or scheduling in Cerner in future. So that will be something that is going to be still kind of trying to figure out how they're going to work that, if there's going to be a specific clerk to pharmacy or how that's going to work in future in Cerner. But that won't be something that pharmacists will be able to do.
Okay, well, we do have a clerk in our pharmacy, but so, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no one else? Good questions.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm imagining that there will be kind of an option to view all treatment notes, or would you have to open each encounter to view notes that are associated with each encounter?
Good question. So the way the notes work is linked to the patient's chart. So you can still have access, even though certain information is filed under certain encounters, you would still be able to see different documents and associated with different encounters, if that makes sense. So yeah, so you don't have to go under each encounter to see the different documents.
Makes sense. Thank you.
I do apologize for the small screen. That was me. I couldn't get the system to work properly for me this morning, so I made what we could work. But we will provide a video afterwards if you want to like zoom in and stuff. But you don't really need to see the little details. We just want you to really capture that quality control angle of making sure that you're, checking that blue banner bar and that you're in the correct encounter. And if you're not, how do you decipher between the two to pick the right one? Because that's really a big step. Even with activating medication and stuff like that, if it's activated on the wrong encounter, the trickle down effect is pretty big. Right, so we want to try and avoid that as much as possible. Other questions? Next week, we're going to try and put all four all the presentations together and kind of do the patient journey from start to finish. So what a typical visit would look like and how that looks like in the system. So please try and make one of the 3 events next week. Also, the World Cafe is next week. So we're coming on the 11th, I believe. Right?
Wednesday, yeah.
And that's an opportunity for you guys to ask us lots of questions. We'll have a learning booth. We'll have a cutover and go live booth, provider booth. There's a couple others. So it's a good opportunity to come in. It'll be in this room. and ask lots of questions of us. We'll be here for 8 hours. So anytime you can make it in, I think there's students or drinks and snacks available as well. Okay. Gear up all your questions because all the big guys are coming next week. All right, Rosie,
Thanks, everyone.
don't forget the survey link, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody signed in? Have a great one.